Hi, everybody. Today, I'm with Sharon Biggar, who is the VP of Marketing at Hotjar. And we are in for a real treat because I'm sure many of you know Hotjar. Many of you out there are using Hotjar. So I'm really delighted that we're going to have a inside look into how Hotjar grew and became the great success that it is today.
Thank you very
So
much.
Sharon,
Very nice to be
welcome
here.
to the show. Can you
Yeah.
start us off by giving us a bit of an
Yeah,
intro
sure. So as you
about
said, my
who you
name's
are and
my
what
name's
you do?
Sharon. I'm originally from New Zealand, and my career started really as a consultant, and then from a consultant, I moved and actually opened my own company. Uh, so I think both of those are really interesting from a marketing background. I think both of them actually touch in the marketing space without you even knowing that you're doing it. The consultant from the strategy side, as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to pitch your company in 30 seconds. So you're actually doing positioning and messaging without even realizing that you're doing it. And then from there, when I decided to move on from my own company, we sold that. And I moved into mobile gaming. And I was leading an analytics team in a large mobile gaming company. And I went there because just the data that mobile gaming companies has is phenomenal. So much data and so much information. It was a lot of fun to use that data and try and improve. It was a free to play game, so a lot of the freemium things that we now deal with in SaaS are highly relevant in that space. And then moved from the analytics inside that company
Mhm.
to become their chief marketing officer. So it's a very roundabout career path I've had to come to marketing, but I think it's actually been
Yeah.
really interesting because it's had the marketing side from the strategy and running my own company, and then I was lucky enough to be able to complement that with the data side at the mobile gaming company, and then a year and a half ago landed
Mhm.
here at Hotjar to lead the marketing.
Yeah, so that pretty much rounded out your view and your exposure from the strategy, from doing marketing, probably as an entrepreneur, um, in some ways grassroots
Yes.
and roll up your sleeves type of marketing, to getting a deep dive into analytics, and then here you are now with Hotjar. Are there any similarities to what how people experience Hotjar and what you did in your gaming background? And do you think sometimes that Hotjar should be almost like a game and fun, so that
Yes, I mean
people are
that's a
delighted
core
with that
goal of
experience?
ours is that users are delighted with Hotjar at every step of the journey. But I think in general, SaaS, particularly SaaS that has either a freemium or a free trial mode, can learn a lot from mobile gaming, because in mobile gaming you have a very short amount of time to capture the interest of the player before they get bored and they'll move on to something else. And the retention is very different. You lose 50% of your players on day one. So if you don't capture them in that first session or two, they're not coming back. And so that whole onboarding experience
Hmm.
is very deeply analyzed in mobile gaming. I think we had data from every 10 or 15 seconds that the player was going through the onboarding for the first 2 or 3 minutes, so that we could check those funnels and check where the drop off
Hmm.
was. And we had very clear metrics as to how many people we wanted to get past the first 2 minutes of the game. So I think that rigor that gaming has for that,
Hmm.
that early onboarding experience is certainly something that SaaS is doing, but I think mobile gaming just has taken it up a notch just because of the competitive environment that they are in.
Hmm. After being in that kind of a high speed, warp speed marketing environment, does it even seem a little bit slow now to you when you're just in, let's say, a trial period that's not make or break in the first
Yes,
in
yeah,
minutes
the
or
people
hours,
aren't
but in
slow, but
days?
that time to results is slow and sometimes
Yeah.
frustrating. At Hotjar, we
Hmm.
have people that will sign up, that will stay on our free plan for months before they decide to upgrade to one of our customer plans. And watching that in the data can be frustrating because from coming from gaming where that happened very fast. Yeah, I've had to learn to be patient and wait to see those conversion metrics.
Yeah. And before we get too far ahead, let's can you just tell everybody who may not be aware of Hotjar? I don't imagine anybody listening hasn't heard of it, but can you just give us a quick overview of
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
Hotjar does and what
Yeah,
problems
so Hotjar
it
is
solves
a
for
product
marketers?
experience insights software, and it's designed for product teams to help them understand what users need. So it provides a window into that user's experience for product teams that are creating digital products, and provides heat maps, session recordings, surveys, so that they can see what's happening on the other side of the screen and what users are getting frustrated at, what they're enjoying. And it goes a little bit deeper than maybe traditional analytics or Google Analytics, which tells you what's happening. The aim of Hotjar is really to tell you the why users are behaving in that way.
Hmm. Excellent. And when people when people see Hotjar, I mean, are you trying to target a particular problem that they are aware of, or do you also think about trying to build awareness around a problem that they don't
Yeah,
yet
I think
realize
mostly
they
people
have?
realize they have the problem. They're not necessarily aware that there is a solution out there for it. So what we find is the product teams that we're targeting, they know that they want to be closer to their audience and closer to their users. But sometimes what we see is that they're going about it
Hmm.
in a more difficult way, in a more manual way. So they might be out there interviewing users, or they might be trying to combine their quantitative data and doing surveys of users and trying to find some way to bring that together. So it's much more manual, much more difficult solution, and particularly when you're a fast growing company, it's very hard to do all of that at scale. And that's the problem that Hotjar is really trying to help solve, is that you can have this empathy with your users, you can understand their user experience, and you can do that at scale and for a growing company.
Hmm. Great. And this is a great example of, I believe, successful product-led growth strategy. Would you agree that that is part of the
Absolutely,
marketing
yes, that's
strategy
very
is
much how we
product-led
view
growth?
it. We think that
Hmm.
the product sells itself. So our job as a marketing team is really to bring people to raise awareness to Hotjar and then bring them to hotjar.com. Our view is, once they see the product, once they get their hands on it, they can very easily self-serve themselves into a free trial or into a subscription if they choose. So that's
Hmm.
we think of it as a flywheel in that sense that if we're able to bring people to the product, thankfully the product is so good that people tend to tell their friends about it, and it's a nice virtual circle in that sense.
Hmm. And I'm sure that you're looking for different behavioral signals of how people use the product to correlate that with propensity to
Yeah.
eventually become a customer. How do you approach that side of the analytics without revealing any of the secret sauce? Just generally, how do you approach that analytical puzzle of really trying to figure out how to craft that experience in a way that people are going to get that shrink the time to first value
Yeah, it's a
and
great question.
maximize your
So
upsell?
we've been doing a lot of work looking at those customers that have the highest lifetime value and are therefore getting the most value from Hotjar. And what we've been doing is looking at how is their behavior in the first 7 days and the first 28 days different from those who are churning or have a lower lifetime value. What are they doing that's different? And then what we're trying to do is create onboarding experiences that match that higher value journey through the product. So what we're trying to do right now, and you might see some changes coming in the product in the next little while, is tailor it more around the jobs to be done from a product team's perspective. So one of the learnings that we've had is that the teams that come in with a specific job to be done, um, if we can help channel them to the right place in the product to solve that problem, then they unlock that value quicker. So we have now, you'll see as you come into the product,
Hmm.
the choice as to what you're really trying to do, what job that you're trying to solve today, and it will do its best to channel you in the right
Hmm.
direction.
Hmm. And what are the, say, top 2 or 3 jobs to be done that you're seeing that correlates the
Yeah, I
strongest
mean, the
with
biggest
LTV?
job that a product team has is to prioritize all of the ideas that they have and to try and figure out which idea that they have will have the biggest impact on their end users and deliver the most value to their end users. So, with that in mind, they tend to come to Hotjar in one of two ways. They tend to come in with an idea of something to improve, and they're looking to validate the hypothesis that they already have. So, they're looking at the recordings to see if yes, this is what's happening inside the product, or they don't have an hypothesis and they're coming into Hotjar to with a clear framework and trying to understand where users are struggling or where users are having a great experience that they can put into their backlog and prioritize versus the other ideas that they have. So it tends to be one of those two routes that brings them in
Hmm.
to begin with.
Okay. And if in looking at the data, are there patterns that are related to habitual use, and do those patterns prove out to be the better predictors, or is it more about just somebody that gets into a really killer feature within a certain window of time, or maybe something else that I don't even know? That this is the way I tend to think about patterns, either habitual use, which predicts, so somebody's really just every day spending a certain amount of time, versus features or a sequence
Yeah,
of features. Is it either
that's a
of
great
those, or is it
question.
maybe
It's
something
closer to the
else?
first one. We think of it like a loop. That if we can get somebody in, they can get an insight from Hotjar that they didn't have before. They can then make a change to their product, use Hotjar to check that the change is improving the user's experience, and then they go around that loop again. So they come back in, find another insight, make their change to their product, verify that the change is working for the users with Hotjar, and keep going around. And the faster that they can do that loop, the more value that they're delivering to their end users, and obviously the more value Hotjar is delivering for
Hmm.
them as well. So that's one of that. It's that sort of cycle that we're trying to encourage our customers to get on.
Hmm. And what about people that aren't coming in with the plan to be persistently always testing and then using the product? So going through that loop, finishing a test, and then rolling into the next one. I imagine that there are people who have a particular who really just want to validate something and then make the change and then either take a break or maybe just move on. Do you see a particular churn from customers who come in to solve a problem, get that problem solved, and then just simply
Yes, we
say
do. We do see we
done?
do have some customers, particularly if they're changing their website. So they might come in, use Hotjar to understand
Hmm.
where their website is today, go through a redesign or a rebranding project, sometimes with an agency, uh, and use Hotjar to check again that the experience has been fulfilled for their customers, and then they might decide to pause Hotjar for a while. I have to say that that kind of typical that pattern of usage we're seeing a decline in. I think even what's changing in the industry is as companies grow and as the market is becoming more demanding, even the websites that might have been owned by marketing teams in the past today are moving into product ownership with obviously a lot of marketing collaboration involved and usually with product marketers deeply embedded into those product teams. But we're seeing more and more product teams owning the marketing website. And once a product team owns it in that way, they are more interested in ongoing optimizations and ongoing improvements to those marketing websites.
Hmm. Hmm. Great. Are there any particular types of businesses or industries where you feel that you all
I
are
think the two
particularly well
industries
suited
that, at
for?
least the two biggest industries that we see in our customer base are e-commerce, where the website is the front of the store, so it's natural that they really want that to be a great digital experience, and also SaaS for the same reason. So those are the two biggest industries we have: e-commerce and SaaS.
Hmm. And in terms of acquisitions, um, what's the ratio between organic efforts to acquire uh, organically through SEO, content marketing, for example, versus direct
We're
paid
very lucky. I
acquisitions?
don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's predominantly organic acquisition that's happening. Um, Thankfully, we have a very large content portfolio that we have been building up over time and continue to invest in. And that is really helping us to drive
Hmm.
traffic to our website. Um, that being said, we do invest quite significantly in paid, and one of our hypotheses is that actually our investments in paid help the organic traffic that's coming to the website. So we see a strong correlation between when we invest in paid and actually uplifts in organic traffic to hotjar.com. And I guess that's not surprising because people may not necessarily click directly on the ad, um, and or they see the
Hmm.
ad, but then maybe see something else and then come to the website.
Hmm. That's very interesting, and I have to say we've seen a lot of evidence of that too, which is not always very. The
Yeah.
attribution is fuzzy, but I specifically with Facebook, but also YouTube, which are more either top or middle funnel, create a lot of awareness. We see that that drives a lot of branded search, and that branded search, um, then part of that goes to organic. But I think maybe that's what you're describing as well. Is just that awareness boost that's created from those ads, whether or not they're either watching the videos to completion or even clicking through. They're still observing and being reminded of the brand and maybe reminded of the problem that they had meant to get back to, and um, then they go and search for the brand, and so then you get you get that organic branded. Are you
Yes,
referring to mostly
exactly. Yeah,
branded
organic brand
organic
research.
that
That's
gets that
yeah,
lift? Okay.
exactly as you
Hmm.
describe, and we see it particularly for us. It's on Twitter and Facebook. If we advertise on those platforms, we might not
Hmm.
necessarily see the direct attribution to those platforms, but we certainly see an uplift across the board and predominantly in branded search.
Hmm. Yeah. Let's stay on this attribution topic for a second because I think it is one of the
Yes, it
biggest
is.
pain points, and it has been one of the most challenging aspects of digital marketing for many years. How do you all tackle the problem of
So I think
channel
probably not in
attribution?
any different way to how anybody else is tackling it. We struggle with this as well. We do the same things. I'm sure many people do, using the UTM parameters to understand where it's coming from. But one of our big challenges is like I'm sure many people have a big proportion of our traffic we can't attribute. Either they've chosen not to accept our cookies, or they themselves have chosen not to have ad tracking. So we're left with only a proportion of our traffic that we can actually attribute to a channel. So we are using multi-touch
Hmm.
attribution, which at least we think hopefully lessened the issues of maybe they see one or two ad or a blog before they come to the site. But I agree with you. It's still very fuzzy. It's not precise in a way that would make it easier to deal with. So I think there's a lot of data helps, but you have to overlay your own logic onto that data.
Hmm. And I think
Yeah.
unfortunately it won't get easier in the near term with the changes happening with especially with the iOS the update which
Yes.
just went live. Was that yesterday maybe or 2 days ago? So um, I think that problem is going to get harder before it gets easier, but it eventually it's there's going to be clarity there. And actually, I think that just opens up more of a need
Yes, I agree.
for the mindset of testing. So you can still, I mean, you can still try to, in a way, piece together that puzzle by, let's say, doing a lift or a holdout test on Facebook, or maybe freezing a certain country just to see, how things behave in an isolated environment. So there's certainly other options to try to get some clues
Yes,
and make some common sense decisions. And that's going to be there's going
Yes,
to
I
be more of a
completely
need for
agree with
that
you. I
now than
think
ever
one of the
before.
mistakes I see happen is people look for certainty with the data. They think data-driven decision making means the data actually decides for you. But I think you're absolutely right. In this attribution space, it's not a perfect science in that way. So one of the things we do, in addition to the couple of ideas that you had, is we tend to take a more holistic approach. So we'll look to see if we do a big bold move, has it actually lifted the needle across the board? And so are we seeing that level of correlation?
Hmm.
But I love your ideas, and we've done the same thing of just stopping a country or stopping some things in a country and seeing what happens. And that gives you an indication, at least, as
Hmm.
to what's working and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah. It does shed some light on the journey itself too. And I imagine that the journey for a tool like Hotjar is not simply a last click dominated type of a journey. I believe that there is quite a lot of research that probably goes in, and people are going to touch um, organically. They're going to touch blog content. They might
Yes, they
even go
do.
onto the reviews sites and look at reviews, and be exposed. There might be a lot of non-click impression based exposure that somehow influences, and it's a complex journey. And I think rather than, as you said, trying to be exactly precise and look for certainty, um, use common sense and know that you should be everywhere, really, because you don't want to miss an opportunity when someone is in a moment where they could be influenced, and you could nudge them down a little further down that path. So I do think still
I completely
multi-channel
agree
is
with
is
you,
essential.
and that's certainly the
Um,
approach that we have taken. I would be remiss if I didn't say the other thing we do is we also use Hotjar to understand where our traffic is. So in fact, we have Hotjar running on our own
mhm,
Hotjar.com site. And in that, we actually ask, after a
mhm,
customer signs up, we actually ask them to help us identify how they heard about Hotjar. So that you might see a little pop up if you sign up to Hotjar asking
mhm,
you, where did you learn about Hotjar? And that's another way, that sort of qualitative feedback that we're getting from the customers, we're combining with that more quantitative attribution data to have a sense of, we can't be everywhere. We do have to choose some channels. And when we're trying to decide between this channel or that channel, it
yeah.
helps us make those decisions.
Mhm. And during that sign up flow or the conversion funnel itself, is there any data that you're able to capture from those prospects as they actually get closer to completing that conversion? Is there any data that allows you to segment them for remarketing campaigns if they don't get to the finish
We're
line?
trying very hard to reduce friction in our sign up flow. So we're actually trying to reduce the number of steps that a user or customer has to go through in the sign up flow. But what we do once somebody does sign up and understands our privacy and terms and conditions, then we are able to remarket to their email address for the purposes of helping them to complete their onboarding experience with Hotjar. We wouldn't use it for any other purpose. So we are using
Hmm.
that as a way to help customers who might not complete their onboarding, to reach out to them to understand what they're having trouble with or what we might be able to help with.
Okay. So this, what you're referring to is post sign up, but people who don't
Exactly.
who don't complete the onboarding experience. What about pre sign up, but people who already get into that flow and for whatever reason they don't actually
Yeah,
finish. They don't
there we're
complete the
using
sign up.
Google to help us.
Um,
So
mhm,
Google, with its cookies and its data, is able to tell us who's been on the site in the last,
mhm.
well, usually we use 90 days, but hasn't completed a sign up event. So we're using their data to remarket to those individuals.
Mhm. And is there any particular segmentation of that audience, which I imagine is a rather large audience, either time-based segmentation or some other form that allows you to customize those ads a little bit
Yeah,
to the
we're very
experience
early
you
in
think
our
that they had at that moment?
remarketing experience, so we haven't yet gone down to that level of detail. I think that's the next step for us, and it's a very exciting next step for us to
Hmm.
target those remarketing ads in a better way.
Yeah. I would imagine even knowing for those people who bail out pre-sign up, if you could know at least if they're e-commerce versus SaaS so that you could tailor those remarketing ads. If I'm
Exactly.
SaaS, I really wouldn't respond to an e-commerce remarketing ad and vice versa. But even knowing that, if these are your two major ICPs, that would be a great first step. But of course, you have to
Yes.
weigh that against that added friction by trying to extract that information. So asking them the question, are you A or are you B or are you C other? You're going to sacrifice a bit of you're going to shrink the size of the audience, and you'll there's that cost side, but you'll have to weigh that against the benefit of the better remarketing. The richer creatives that you can show, the more relevant creatives. But what I will say is that we just tested this with one of our large B2C SaaS clients, and actually we asked a couple of questions about um, we asked two particular questions related to a person's level of experience so that we could generally slot them as a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced level. And then another aspect about like a particular preference for how they would be using that. It was essentially two questions. And we postponed that literally for over a year because everybody thought this is just going to kill our conversion rate. If we add friction, the cost that we're going to pay is too great for the added benefit on the remarketing side. And guess what? After literally 2 days, and this gap is closing. The conversion rate without those two questions, once people got into the flow, was 18%. Once we
Wow.
added those, it went down to 17%. And actually, because it's been only 2 days, the gap is closing. What we're realizing is actually we were wrong. And users who feel that their experience is being customized and that they're actually going to benefit from that, looks like they're happy to provide that information freely, and they're not dropping
That's
out.
yeah.
So that was a major learning, and I
That's
would
a fantastic
encourage you to test
experience.
that and
Yeah.
not go in with a
Yes, and
bias, because we were all very surprised, and in fact probably we lost a year just because everybody just assumed, no,
yeah, no, and
that's
you're
just
absolutely
gonna
right. We certainly
not
have that
work.
bias ourselves, and we
Um,
do believe we hypothesize, I should say, because we don't know. We haven't run that experiment that you're talking about, but we hypothesize that adding in the friction would reduce the conversion rate. So we haven't done it. In fact, we're going in the opposite direction. So it's really interesting to hear that learning. We should
mhm,
consider it for sure.
mhm. Let's pivot over to the organic side now a little bit, because I'm very curious. You mentioned the bulk of the acquisitions is really coming from organic because you have laid that foundation over years with great content. And I know this because I've been exposed to that content quite a lot over the years. And can you tell me a little bit about what goes into that effort? How do you maintain that that kind of rigorous
Yes,
content editorial calendar,
it's very
and
tough
what's behind the scenes?
because we actually have very high quality standards on the content that we produce, which makes it a continual debate because our preference would be to only have people inside Hotjar write that content, because we believe that they know the product so well that they have the quality that we're looking for. And then it's a challenging decision between, if we do that, of course, the amount of content that we can produce and publish is lower versus if we can go out to freelancers or agencies to help us to write that content, then we can have a greater volume of content and reaching more interests for our users. So there's always this natural tension that goes on between those two. So what we've been working on, I would say, over the last 6 months is how do we help our external writers to have the same level of product knowledge and inside knowledge that our inside content team does, so that there isn't this difference in quality between the two. So it starts. We've really worked hard on the figuring out how to brief writers correctly, how to recruit them into the process correctly. So they all go through a testing phase before we're willing to let them loose on a piece of content, and then how to edit them and how to maintain that high quality at the same time as training them. So And so they are getting that inside knowledge into the product so that their quality is at the same level as our internal writers. So yes, it's quite a factory in some ways. I don't like to use that word. It's obviously a digital environment, but it's a machine that we need to keep well oiled and well processed in order to be able to keep the quality, but also the quantity that we want.
Hmm. Do you ever revisit old blog posts based on um, what you see as the potential to reinvigorate them, really update them, refresh them, and how do you look at that process of
Yes,
refurbishing old content
yeah, we
versus
certainly
maybe
do. We
de-indexing
have
it?
our SEO strategists spend a significant amount of time looking at the data, and they have a portfolio approach to writing new content as well as optimizing old content. So within a given month, there'll always be new content coming out, but also content that we'll be going back to and optimizing. I should say we also have a list of keywords that, for strategic reasons, which is a little bit outside of SEO reasons per se, but for company strategic reasons, we believe Hotjar should rank very highly for. And so we are constantly monitoring that set of keywords to make sure that we are number one or number two. And if we ever see those drop below that, then we will be actively optimizing the content around those keywords to make sure that we continue to rank highly for those words.
Hmm. And I've also noticed a lot of
Yes.
effort going into
Yes,
case
I think,
studies.
Hotjar still, one of the things that we're conscious of is, even though we think we're well known, but we're a little bit in the inside circle, uh, there's still a lot of people out there that aren't aware of Hotjar. And we find that's true, particularly in the US. In Europe, we're better known, but in the US, we're less well known. And so obviously case studies certainly help with that, with the social proof, as well as allowing customers to see how other customers are getting value out of Hotjar.
Hmm. Is there anyone at Hotjar who is really tasked with trying to extract those wins and those success stories from the current customers in order
We
to
don't have a
use that to create
specific
content?
person, but we do have a whole team. Our customer marketing team is constantly involved with post once someone has subscribed to Hotjar, helping educate those customers and understanding how they're using the product, as well as getting feedback from them. So just in their natural day-to-day work, they're in touch with both the things that
Hmm.
are going well, but also the things that are going badly. So that's really helpful in terms of both feeding back to the product to fix the things that are not going so well, but also for those that have had a big win. There's a natural loop there to be able to just step into a case study.
Hmm. Great. Yeah, I imagine that could be a treasure trove of content. Maybe even just micro stories and little wins that people get, and little insights that, oh, hey, Hotjar allowed me to see something that was it was obvious, but I was missing it, and we made this change, and this happened, and they don't necessarily need to
In
become
fact,
full
in
blown
fact,
case studies, but it just
yeah, you raise an
great
interesting point,
stories that can
because
be
one of the
told.
challenges we have is that actually our audience don't necessarily want to read long form content. So we have a lot of 2,000 or more blogs that are 2,000 words in length. Um, but very few people, I know I don't have time to read blogs that are that long anymore. In fact, you see more and more content moving to
Hmm.
videos or infographics or other forms of content. So one of our challenges is, how do you balance that with Google's need for long form content when it's in its ranking algorithms, which are this
Hmm.
black box that we all have to try and guess what's inside there. But the rumors are that it values and favors long
Hmm.
form content. So it's a bit of a challenging mix, because if that's not what our
Yeah,
audience wants, but it is what Google wants, we have to try and figure that one out. So yes,
accommodate both. Yeah, yeah. I can say one of the ways we're trying to approach that, and before I describe it, I find it kind of ironic, and it's a little bit disturbing that I agree exactly with what you said,
yeah,
but it can't persist this way for too long. Users are not users are the patience and the attention span keeps shrinking and shrinking. Users are not as apt to want to sit down and spend 10 or 15 minutes to really get into a 2,000 word article. They typically they want to grab a nugget and grab it and go and then move on to the next thing. And short videos now seem to be the most snackable type of content that satisfies that. But yet Google seems to still be powered by this long form content. And I just find that ironic and probably unsustainable. Um, what we're trying to do is to create short form content for the users,
Mm.
which can be repurposed into the long form content that satisfies Google. And an example of that would be a 2-minute video that covers at a high level a particular strategy and then trying to repurpose that into a blog post. It doesn't always work though, but in some cases it does. And I imagine if you think about the case study format, if you could shrink that down into a micro win or a micro learning, which is just something like, hey, this here's a B2B SaaS company in the LMS space, and they made this quick change, and voila, they were able to increase their conversion rate by 50%. Um, that could be a nugget, and that could be delivered through a video and maybe repurposed or maybe not. But I imagine that those aha moments happen maybe hundreds of times a day inside of your product, um, and
Yes, I think
it could be
that's a great
mined
idea, and I think
like
that's the
nuggets.
direction
Hmm.
we'll start to take our content. And I agree with you. I don't think Google can last much longer with this favoring long form content. I think it, it we all need to move to what the user wants, and I think they'll come along at some point.
Yeah, what I have started noticing is that Google is now getting good at actually trying to provide the
Yes,
answer that lives inside of a video in the search results, and it can even give you these
yeah, it tells you where to go,
what are
and so
they,
yeah,
little
it's very cool.
bookmarks, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's really neat.
Yeah, yeah. Um, somebody had even asked, somebody pointed out one of our videos that showed up in a search result that had that, and I had never seen that before, and I was amazed. And the person asked, well, how did you all do that? And I said, I have no idea, we
Yeah,
didn't
it's
do that. That's so cool. But the Google just found the answer by, I guess, listening. Of course, natural language processing, they've been able to do that for a while, but they were able to hone in on exactly the little 5-second segment that provided that answer and fast forward the user in the search
it's very
result right to
impressive,
the
isn't it? It's
that
very
little
amazing
segment.
when you consider they're
Pretty amazing.
indexing however many
Yeah.
trillions of pages.
Yeah. So maybe there's a second life for all of our webinars now. If that starts happening. Um, yeah, because even webinars are getting a little bit, I think, a little bit crusty because of that same reason. Not everybody wants to sit through an hour-long webinar anymore. And if I can get in and really get great value in 10, 15 minutes, maybe I'd
Yes,
prefer that.
there's something ironic in the data, isn't it? Since the pandemic started, I mean, I think all
Mhm.
the surveys are showing more and more of us are spending greater amount of time online than we did before the pandemic, and yet our patience to sit through something like an hour-long webinar is decreasing. So
Yeah. Are we just trying
I
to be
guess
two or
so.
three times more productive now than we were before, or I don't know, or just yeah, we just want to get more efficient at how we consume and get the value and then just move on. I have to admit, I sense that in myself too. Um, that if I get attracted by something, I'm really hunting in a way for the value, and when I feel like I've got it, I could even be on the second or third paragraph.
No,
But if I feel like
I
I've
see
got
the
it,
same thing in
I'm
behavior
gone.
myself. And if I jump onto Medium and see that the article is going to
Mhm.
take 10, 15 minutes, I'm like, oh, I don't have time for this. And I'll jump off again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Well, enter Hotjar's heat maps, and could certainly analyze your blog content and see. Generally those heat maps are going to show you that attention
that's
span and
right.
in full color. Yeah. Well, this has been great, Sharon. I really appreciate you sharing some of these great insights. It's a phenomenal product. Before we wrap up, do you have any really big picture goals that if you project out 6 months or 12 months out, where are you trying to go with Hotjar? And what
Yes,
does the future of
sure.
the
So
product look like?
the big goals we are working on today is actually we are in the process of rebranding Hotjar, which is a super fun project, and I'm looking very much looking forward to
Oh,
releasing it
exciting.
to the public when that time comes. Uh, and and we're trying to take a very user driven approach to this rebranding. Um, so it's been a very fascinating project from day one because we very much believe in user driven product development and user driven marketing, and we've been contacting agencies to help us with rebranding and design agencies, and it's surprising for me how few agencies are actually user driven in their rebranding. So we had proposals back maybe from 6 or 7,
Hmm.
and yet I think only one of them suggested taking their ideas for the rebrand actually out to potential customers to see how they would respond to it. And for us, that was an eye opener because
Hmm.
everything we do, we take the that's how DNA. We go to the
Wow.
potential
Yeah, that's your
customers and say,
DNA.
is this, even in our positioning work, we're out there testing, does this copy work better than that copy? In our messaging, we're doing the same thing. And then, we had agencies, some of whom were at phenomenal sums of money. And when you ask them, okay, you're going to present us with two different logos and brand, visual brand kits, how are we going to choose between them? And they say, oh, well, we present them and you choose. I'm like, but we're not our customer. We can give you our
Hmm.
subjective view, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we think. What matters is how the potential customers respond to it. So I think this has been a big learning for us that the branded side of marketing is so important, but it needs to be grounded in data in a way that it hasn't been up until now. And I think this is a big change that you'll start to see
Hmm.
happen in the marketing industry in a few over the next years or so.
Yeah.
We were
Please
not
just
changing
promise
the
me that
name.
the name is
No,
not
we
going to
love that name.
change. Okay, good. Yeah, I think it's for me it's iconic, and yeah, I would be sad. I agree with you. I actually had a bit of a personal experience to get inside and run one of these brand creative agencies, and actually to try to pivot it more towards performance. And I fully agree that there is still really an older world view, which is driven. The creatives in that space are driven a lot more really by the creative energy that they get themselves from their work. And I think that's a great thing.
Yes,
That's what drives these people. A lot of times that's connected with winning awards and just notoriety and the personal satisfaction that you get from your own creation. But it is very much about you, the creator, and it's not really audience or user focused. And I think that's where performance marketing is introducing, and performance creative is flipping that on its head and trying to tell these people that actually, I'm sorry, but your opinions or even your resume doesn't matter that much anymore, because if we can test, we will test, and we're going to let our users
yes,
tell us what they prefer. And and this is not a once in a lifetime 30-second Super Bowl TV spot that we have to get right. No, we can actually launch a
absolutely.
A or B or a C version and try to get some insights before we
Yes.
actually decide what we're going to go with. It's a very different
Yeah, it's
mindset,
a
and I
very
can
different
I can
mindset, and
relate
it's
exactly to what you're
surprising how
saying.
ingrained it is. Even yeah, even that many of the agencies we're talking to are saying things like, "Well, of course, we'll need your CEO on the call to make the decision between logo A or logo B," and we're like, he's going to want to look at the data and see what the users how they're reacting. But it's I
Hmm.
think there's this a change that's going on more broadly than marketing, but I think brand marketing has just been a little bit step behind, and as you say, performance marketing has by its nature
Hmm.
been forced to move into this world where it uses data to make decisions. I think brand has
Yeah.
in some ways tried to stay away from that. And in some ways, I get the sense that maybe they even think there's a stigma of using data to drive decisions. That brand is somehow more creative, more innovative, and you don't. Yes,
Sacred, maybe.
magical in some
Mm.
ways. You don't want to taint
Yeah.
it with analytics
Right.
and
Right.
data, but I think that just I think we have to be humble and recognize that we don't know what our customers are going to respond well to, and the best thing we can do is ask them.
Mhm. I remember a conversation that I had with a creative director at a big brand agency recently, and I remember him saying something along the lines of, "Please don't make me spoil this with the CTA button." He was so against it, and I was like,
Hmm.
"Well, that's the whole point. I mean, we want them to take an action after this." And he saw that as
Yes.
ruining his
Yes. I
masterpiece
think that's
entirely.
if I have a personal crusade, it is that it's you know performance marketers understand the need for brand marketers and understand the need to invest in brand marketing and performance marketing. But there still today are some brand marketers who don't think performance marketing is needed, and that in fact you can just run your entire marketing budget with brand marketing, and that somehow performance marketing is a lesser
Hmm.
skill or a lesser craft. Um, I think my personal crusade is to say no, it's absolutely essential. You have both brand marketing and performance marketing, and they need to work very well together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been great, Sharon. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted me to ask you, or that you would like for our audience to
No,
know?
I think we covered everything. No, I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Same here. And thanks for spending the time with me. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the journey ahead with Hotjar, the rebranding, and the continued growth. It's an amazing product, and I
Well,
imagine it's going to continue getting better. So
thank you so
thanks
much for
for
having
sharing all
me.
these great insights today.